Alright, I'm going to get started. My name is Thomas. I'll be presenting today on Jesa, which is also, if you were to translate it, it's Korean Ancestral Rites or the Memorial Ceremonies. So what is it? The Memorial Ceremonies. I'll go into the details, obviously. Start with the origin. So in China, ancestral rituals can actually be traced back via written documents to the Shang, however you say it, dynasty, which was pretty early. Archaeological findings also suggest that it may have been previous to that, even as early as the Neolithic period. So although there aren't any historical records verifying when exactly we can trace the Jesa ceremony back to, we do know that it's been around for an extremely long time. And during that time, it has changed. It's evolved as Korea's been influenced, especially by different religions and different ideologies. So when Buddhism was adopted in Korea during the unified Shilla period and also the Goryeo dynasty, the shamanistic practices changed a bit as a result of this. And as the Jesa came into Korea, it had to change so that people could still have their other beliefs but follow this. So it was really during the Joseon dynasty from 1392 to 1910 that the Confucian government attempted to Confucianize the nation while suppressing Buddhist and shamanistic influence, that this really became most prominent and widespread throughout Korea. There were texts that came in from China around this time that people began to follow. They were written by Confucianist scholars, and they wrote exactly how to perform this ceremony. So Confucianism at this time pervaded all aspects of life, thanks to the government, and so along with that came Jesa, which had already been prominent in China at this time. Even though it had already existed in China under Confucianistic systematic processes, it had already existed in Korea, they just did it differently. So when Confucianism was adopted to a greater degree during the Joseon period, it was just systematized to more of a Confucianistic way of doing things. So Confucius and other early Confucian scholars are said to have employed existing ancestral practices as a means of promoting filial piety and duty and bonding family and social order. So it wasn't, as far as Confucianistic views went, it wasn't necessarily so much a way of creating some sort of balance between the dead and the living. It was just to ensure that there was this filial order, this systematic order of and hierarchy of the younger serving and worshiping the older. Subsequent Confucian scholars further systematized the Confucian style of ancestral rites and published different manuals, which I mentioned. One of the most famous manuals is called Family Rites by the author Chu, I don't know how to say it, Chu Hsi, Chinese guy. And that's what most of the Korean practices were based off of at the beginning of the Joseon dynasty. So this guy, this isn't who I just mentioned, said that the ancestral ritual is the expression of a man's affectionate longing. It represents also the completion of propriety and refinement. The superior men, Confucian scholars, considered it as the activity of man, while the ordinary people consider it as the activity to do with the spirit. So as I was saying, Zunzi, or however you say his name, and other Confucian scholars considered it an ancestral practice as a sort of social propriety. Ordinary people considered it more of having some sort of supernatural force, the ability to, like I said, create some sort of balance between the dead and the living. And a lot of people at that time, they didn't understand death or what it was, and so in order to get rid of that fear that they had over death, they would perform these sort of ceremonies. And also they felt like in doing so they were able to sort of satisfy the dead and maybe even receive some sort of reward from them. With the beginning of the Joseon dynasty in the late 14th century came the beginning of legislation to change Korean society along Confucian lines. One such example is the government instituting burial as a legitimate disposal method versus cremation, which was dominant when there was more Buddhist influence. Due to the government's adamant Confucian policy, Confucian ancestral rites were rooted in the life of the Korean people by the 18th century. It appears there are two main views among Koreans as to what makes ancestral worship significant. One, while whether a man worships his father or not does not affect the happiness of their father or the son, it does affect the reputation of the son among his acquaintances as being a man who either respects or disrespects the spirit of his father. So it has to do with face, sort of, like how you look among other people, which is extremely important. And two, other Koreans may say that if they perform these rites, the God of heaven will reward them with money, honor, and other promoters of happiness. If they do not, they'll be rewarded with some sort of evil or difficulty. Especially for the Confucian elite, the ancestral ritual was the essential ritual for expressing filial piety. One Confucius scholar said to a missionary when he heard the message of Christianity at the turn of the 20th century, "You said that the way to hell is wide and its gate is large, so there are many who enter there. Yet the way to heaven is narrow and its gate is small, so there be few who enter heaven. Thus many a friend of mine must be in hell, and as my parents had not believed in Jesus, they must be destined to hell." Confucius said that he who did not alter the way of his father was a filial son. It is right, therefore, for me to go to where my parents went, and it is joyful to be where my friends stay. How can I go to heaven by myself and become unfilial to my parents and unfaithful to my friend? This just represents the line of thought with the Confucian and how it conflicted with religions of the time. As I probably won't have time to go into more detail, but as Christianity entered into Korea, it created difficulties as Confucianistic society still wanted to follow this filial practice of worshiping their dead or performing these ceremonies, where Christianity completely banned that. And so as soon as people stopped doing these things, in actually 1791, some people burned the tablets that they used for the Jesa ceremony, and they were executed by the Joseon government. And later, in the 1900s, there were other problems with this. If I have time, I'll get into it more. So, the Jesa memorial ceremony and the Chudo Yebe. The Chudo Yebe is the Protestant form of Jesa that developed later as a result of it being a sort of form of idol worship in order to counter that. They do the Jesa ceremony slightly differently so that it doesn't seem so much like idol worship. So Jesa, Confucianism developed the 4 family rituals of coming of age, marriage, funeral, and ancestral rites. Among these 4 rituals, ancestral rites, memorial ceremonies, played the most important role in Korean family life. This was exemplified by the fact that in Confucian Korea, all these ceremonies were held in front of the ancestral shrine. So no matter what they did it in front of their ancestral shrine, which just goes to show how important this ceremony really was. Marriage was also understood as a means of producing a ritual heir in order to secure the continuity of ancestral rites. So the purpose of marriage was so they could have a son who could perform these rites for them. A passage in Lee Ki, Book of Rites, reads, "The wedding rite is intended to unite the relationship of the 2 families with a view to securing retrospectively the services in the ancestral temple and prospectively the continuance of the family line." And so in Confucian Korea, it was legal to even have a second wife or to adopt relatives if your initial marriage failed to produce a son. That's how important it was. So this is one of the only traditions that existed originally and still exists today. There are 4 different types of Confucian ancestral rites: the death day ritual, which is the Kije, special food offerings, chare, seasonal ritual, shije, and communal ritual. Of these, the most important is probably the Kije. When people refer to the Jesa, it's referring to the kije. The kije is, as it says here, performed on the death day anniversary of a loved one, of their parents. Just like there's a birthday, they felt like it was right that they should have a death day and celebrate that. And actually, originally, it was a celebratory time. Even today, there are kije ceremonies to worship past Joseon kings called the Jongmyo. At the Jongmyo shrine, they do this. I'm going to skip over this because of time and get into more of what the Jesa ceremony actually looked like. I figured since this is a culture section, I'd try to go more into this than the actual history. So this is what the table would be set up as, and so 2 different views. Here they actually got different lacquerware and whatnot, just especially for the ceremony. This is where they write the name. It's called the shinwi, or the tablet of the dead, however you want to say it. The first row here, so the closest to you, is actually what they're going to eat last. So it starts off with, as it says, dates, chestnuts, pears, persimmons, apples, and then snacks. And you can actually add other things here too. It doesn't really matter. You'd especially add things that the deceased person would have enjoyed. So if they liked, even if they liked bananas, today you could throw up bananas, even though that wasn't a traditional food. And then the next row is for lighter banchans. So they have vegetables, maybe a little bit of fried fish, and some other just really light things that they eat with their meal. The third row is for soups. These are different types of meat. So here they have just a meat, and then beef, and then a fish soup. And it's always in an odd number, so 3, 5, and sometimes even up to 7 if it's a really big Jesa. And then next they have the bigger meat banchan. And so they've got just different meats here. Note that if the fish is always facing to the east, which is going to be your right, and their back is always facing you, so that it's as if the deceased person is going to be viewing it. Because this is where the deceased person is. And then in the final row is the main meal. They've got their rice, mostly, and then you've got these candles here, and then you'd have some incense maybe burning. Yeah?
I'm trying to think, there's some foods or certain things that they can't have for Jesa. Do you know what those are?
So,
I'm trying to remember. There's like certain colors or certain...
Yeah, there are different colors that they go with. Typically, in different rows, they'll use different colors. Okay. But now, because of all of the different influences on the Jesa ceremony, it varies. People do pretty much whatever they want. The last food to be prepared, though not on the table, is cheongju. It's a Korean liquor similar to sake. So this is what it looks like. Note that the screen is back here, and then this is where the ancestor will come from. They'll come from behind the screen, is what they believe. And this is their ancestral tablet where they write the name of the individual. So an example would be like respected father. They don't actually say the person's name. They just write the title for them. Or respected mother. And in here they'd write what clan they were and their last name. So if she's from the Kim clan, I have an example, then it would be Kim Hae, Kim Shi. Instead of XXX, it would be Kim whatever. And then they light the incense. And they also have a chukmun, which is something that they read. We'll get into this. Get going. So the first thing that they do is they invite the guest by opening doors. The Jeju is the eldest son, and he's always in charge of this rite. He goes in, and he starts everything. Everybody kneels down. He lights the incense, and then the initial offering is made by him. This is called the chohan. And then they read this chukmun. The chukmun is just something saying, grace us with your presence. Thank you for your blessings. And then after that, they have the ahan, which was originally done by actually the female, and it's changed to being maybe a different sun. Then so then the oldest son, the Jeju, sticks the spoon in the rice, invites they all leave so that the ancestor or ancestors can eat, and then he signals to the ancestor that they're going to come back in the room by clearing his throat or coughing a few times. That way the ancestor, I guess, can leave. And then they all come back in, they kneel down, and he puts out the incense, he burns the chukmun, and if they used a paper tablet, because it doesn't have to be wooden, they can just write the name on a piece of paper, he burns that. And then sometimes there are some additional things that they do as well. And then there's the chudo, and anyways, that's just a brief summary of the Jesa. Are there any questions about the Jesa?
Does the Jesa involve bowing?
Yeah, so
So throughout the thing, there's certain times like bow here, bow here.
initially when they're welcoming the guest, everyone goes in and they bow twice. And when they're bowing, there's actually a special posture, and they have their right hand over the left, and they go down, and then they're actually kneeling most of the time. So it's not necessarily bowing completely face to the ground the whole time. It does, again, depend on the religion. Lots of people have changed how they do it just so it meets more with their religion. Other questions? All right, that's it.